Hello there, it's me, Steve Mellor, and welcome in to GrowthReady, the podcast that allows high performers to reveal the reality behind what it means to ready yourself for growth, the personal and professional challenges along the growth journey, while also allowing the high-performance executive coach in me to satisfy his curiosity toward what drives optimal performance. Our guest this week is CEO of Costa Rica's call center, Mr. Richard Blank. And Richard's journey has been one of following fulfillment. But as he's going to share, in order to do so, we have to be willing to take the slow and steady route in order to achieve optimal growth. Hello there, and welcome into the latest installment of the GrowthReady podcast. I am beyond excited to be welcoming in Richard Blank into the show today. And Richard, as I do with all my guests now, before we start diving into your story and all the great insights I know you're going to be bringing to us today, what does it mean to you to be growth ready?
To be growth ready is prepared for it. It's the dedicated practice like a boxer or an Olympic swimmer. You practice so you can compete. And so you're not afraid, you're ready. And as long as you woke up early, stayed late, had a good diet, did that extra push-up, then the chances are you did that extra push-up more than your competition. So ready is about that full preparation, A to Z and 1 to 3.
Love it. So much there straight away. The idea of always being fully prepared and also the sense of not being afraid. We're definitely going to get into that knowing your story. But Richard, what I want to do here is just to give you the space here to tell us a little bit to our listeners where you are, what it is you do for a living, and what it is that you do to keep you on your toes with your work today. So fill us in on who we're talking to here, brother.
Well, Coach Steve, I can't thank you enough. I'm so happy to be a guest here. I'm originally from Northeast Philadelphia. In fact, in my elementary education, I had the pleasure of being taught by the famous Dick Scholberg how to swim at Germantown Academy before I left in 7th grade and went to Abington, but that's another story for another day. But I was a Spanish major in college at Arizona, and I doubled down on it and took jobs post-grad where I could get an ROI on that. But you know, when I was 27 years old, I got a 1 in a million opportunity. A very good friend of mine said, Richie, why don't you come to Costa Rica for a couple months? You're in between jobs. I was sending out resumes via fax machine. I showed you how old it was. And he said, take a time out, teach some English, come down and relax for a bit. And when I was here, it really opened my eyes to Central America, shedding skin. 27 is not a kid, nor too much of an adult. You're at a really perfect age. Yeah. Not like Jimmy and Janice and, you know, those guys, but, you know, sometimes it's a transition time. Either you get busy living or dying. And so I wanted to throw my hat in the ring while I still had hair and I still was young, and I wanted to go for it. And what happened? I learned the business from the inside out. I stayed for 4 years. I didn't go home. I got past parents' guilt. I made certain strong, selfish decisions to give myself 100% and not 60% because I thinned myself out. And so learning the business from the inside out, and then 17 years ago, I threw my hat in the ring, started the business, and now today, the proud CEO of Costa Rica's call center. Sold my soul for a golden fiddle, but it was worth it.
Your entire journey is there's so many parallels to mine. Let's put it that way. You're a few years ahead of it than I am, but at the same time, we managed to get the same haircut in the process. So there's definitely
we have nice
some
faces. That's all that matters.
That's right. But I want to go back to that 27-year-old Richard, because I think that's really important here in this story. And when I think about the growth ready concept, and especially as well, one of those first things you said there when you responded to the first question, you talked about the lack of fear, not being afraid.
That's right.
And so when you think about that time in your life, and I think these moments, they come so often, and we're unable to see them when they come. We're too good at dismissing them when a true opportunity is right there in front of us. And this obviously was a huge life-altering choice for you. So when you think back to that 27-year-old Richard, What was it that allowed you to look at that either without fear, or how did you handle the fear that maybe you did actually have?
Fear will always keep you on your toes. It needs to be healthy. It shouldn't be a hindrance. And also, my good friend, I was building on momentum, kind of like when you're pushing off from the wall and you still got that little bit there before you start swimming. How's your push off, right?
Yeah.
How is that? Do you get trajectory? Do you get distance? Is that a strength for you? And so when I was a little boy in elementary school, I gravitated towards Spanish. I would pick up vocabulary and from time to time learn some grammar when I would meet a Latino, because it was outside of my circle. None of my friends or family could do it. And so I was getting such a positive reinforcement. Athletes, when they grow muscle, they get faster, more endurance, they can go the distance. So that is where the market speaks. You can't spin it. It's the truth. You are running that fast. You are swimming that fast. You can jump that high. And so for me, I saw progression. But then here's the skins, and this is where it really comes down. I love the movie The Karate Kid, the original with Ralph Macchio and Mr. Miyagi.
Yeah.
And what I learned at that age was dedicated practice. If you go, it's not when you're in the pool with Dick Scholberg making you do laps at 5 a.m. on a Tuesday for school. No, it's the above and beyond. It's on your own time when you are investing in that. And it's almost like when you go to the gym when none of your friends want to go. Well, that's just how it goes, man. You sometimes have to roll solo and get up in the morning and run and exercise. And so by default, I was the only one still doing something. And I still had a work-life balance. I could hang with my friends and have fun, but I found the time to continue this Spanish. And then when I was in high school, I got this recommendation letter from my dedicated Spanish teacher that offset my terrible grades to get me into college. Thank you. And so these were hints along the way. These were exceptionally positive checkpoints. It's not how many beers can I put down or how fast can I drive and how many times I can get away with it. I wasn't getting away with anything. I was openly putting my skills out there to be not critiqued, but improved, and also making yourself vulnerable because you are being timed and you are being sized up and compared, and that's fine. There will always be a Mike Tyson, but there will always be a Glass Joe. And so where do I fit in the middle? And as long as and you know this, your toughest days when your muscles are so sore, and you come home and you just want to fall into bed, but before you do that, you got to wash up. And so you're looking at yourself and you're like, damn, man, look what you did today. Look what you did. And so when you can give yourself 5, you can look at yourself in the mirror, wipe off the mud and the blood, and you say, well done, champ. Oh, man, if you can get that sort of self-respect and dignity, that's more than enough water that will carry you through deserts. And if you can do these things at younger ages when you're not forced into it, getting paid for it, or pressured in a certain way of success and failure, it's really for personal growth. And so I had this foundation as a young man, and I was the only one doing the second language. So what are you going to compare it with? No one could swim, just me.
Right.
And so when that opportunity came, my brother, it's almost like clouds and that one ray of sunshine hitting me. I'm like, okay, I got your point.
Okay.
It's time to go.
And I love that you gave us all that backstory and all that insight, and you're able to capture that in that definition of self-respect. And self-respect, we've touched on so many different topics over the years with this show. Self-respect, I wouldn't say it's a new one, but it's definitely about time we talked about it again. Let's put it that way. And so for me, to hear you even provide that in-depth definition of how self-respect can be established, you think about those crossroads in life when we have a decision to make to bet on ourselves or to refrain from doing so. The power that self-respect can have in that moment to justify a difficult decision, because you didn't, it sounds as though, as you're describing this, and you've separated yourself through this point in your life, and you very much gravitated towards a passion in your Spanish, and you found your lane.
Yes.
Through that process, you've been able to also justify that I'm someone that's worth betting on. And why wouldn't I be the one who bet on me? Am I hearing that right?
Oh, it's an excellent bet.
Yeah.
It's an excellent bet because you have the most control. It's like inside information.
Yeah.
And so, yes, my friend, I mean, and I also recommend people that make their beds so the circle's complete when you come home. And when you say self-respect, I mean, you're not patronizing, you're not pretending you're superior, but there's nothing wrong with eating well, resting, working out, learning. That's what we all should be doing. But if somebody grasps a topic or has more passion towards something, it's those that are envious and those that can't look at themselves in the mirror or cannot get up at 5:30, cannot do 6 days in a row. Those are the ones that look at you and they go, you know, and so it's okay. There's, you know what it is, my good friend? It's negative Nancy's, Debbie Downers. It's the guys on the swim team that aren't as dedicated. It's your friends that don't show up on time. And so little by little, it's not like you can't keep relating to people, but there's wind in your sails and there's others that hold you back.
Yeah.
And the ones that love me the most, unfortunately, held the most weight. And so you sometimes have to separate the two or make a structured argument or just call a timeout and go, why don't we just not discuss this? Because I don't want it to be a deal breaker.
Yeah.
And you should just say, go, Richard, go.
Yeah.
So a lot of the times I had to have that conversation with people that doubted what I was doing, fearful because they didn't do it. They never moved abroad, learned a second language, started a call center. So as much as I love you, what kind of advice is that? Right. You have no advice. Yeah. I mean, you've never run a call center. You've never listened to QA. You've never done coaching. You've never onboarded. You don't even know Spanish. So how are you giving me advice? I mean, tell me how to cook a burger. I'm like, don't tell me this. And so I had to respectively accept their opinions, but not agree with them. And so that was a very good way for me to preserve that raw spark that you have that is constantly trying to be extinguished by people and put out. And so I'm not saying it in a bad way. You know, there's a lot of friends out there that really
want... You're saying it in a truthful way, though. I mean, the truth is the truth, right? Reality is reality. I just don't mean to cut you off, but I think that's really important here, is to just acknowledge that what you're speaking to right now is reality, and that inability to take advice from the right person or just to see it as insight and say, hey, I hear it. I'm not necessarily going to use it in my judgment just based on who you are, what you've achieved, what your actual exposure and experience is with, but I respect you enough to at least hear it. A lot of the time, that ability to build that self-respect can be completely, you can have that ability just taken away from you because you're too busy listening to other people's interpretations of what you should and should not be doing. So you can't ever actually formulate that lane for yourself to build the self-respect that you need to push you in those hard times. It's almost like this cycle of, if you get on the wrong cycle, you can't really ever build the self-respect. But then the other cycle is about making sure that you're pushing those people away, or not necessarily even pushing them away, just ensuring that you're keeping them at an arm's length and not taking everything as guarantees or specific applicable advice.
What about leverage? I mean, I'm growing up. My parents were supporting me. I can't be a rebel and make up rules.
Right.
You might be working with somebody, or there might be certain structure. So some people financially might have it over you and some sort of other sort of discipline, but you have to be very careful. Choose your battles wisely. And so my argument to my parents for my own self-respect was, you can't put me in a box in college. First, I don't have the grades for Ivy League like Grandpa and my dad and brother. Second, I didn't want to be an attorney. I wasn't going to Columbia Business School. I didn't have the grades, nor the maturity. And my brother was a finance major at Washington and Lee University. I was thinking of this, and it just reminded me of Sunday night homework sessions when it's raining outside and it's 9 o'clock and I'm tired and I'm like, oh crap, I can't believe I got to do this. And I said, I got to do this for the rest of my life. What a forced march. What a terrible thing to do. And so I used the argument of my great-grandparents that came to the United States at the turn of the 20th. And I did this at 17 years old. I was like, good boy. Come on, great-grandpa Louis. He came from Romania. Couldn't even speak English. Moved to New York, was in the garment industry, and we made our money during the Depression. If it wasn't for this guy, we wouldn't even be here. And they just looked at me. I go, hey, listen, secondly, I'm choosing Arizona. And in-state tuition is next to nothing compared to $30,000 a year. And this is in the early 90s. To go to certain schools. And I go, let's all calm down for a second. I go, I'm also being financially responsible on something like this. Well, Richard, you're not going to guarantee a return on investment on a second language. Well, I'm not going to guarantee something if I put 20% into it and then I'm miserable the rest of my life. You like this smile? You'll never see it again if you force me to do things like that. And I go, trust me, I have this personality, and with the Spanish as the medium, I know I can do something. And guess what I did in college? I interned for Telemundo for 2 years. I once again had to prove that this thing could get me marketable, people would find interest in it, and I could work in it. And so it still was the patting on the head, yeah, Stevie, that's cute parlor trick that your parents might think is fun for their friends. But my man, this is the tiger inside you. You really want to go for this. And it's the worst thing ever is when people can put that out. And so they had the blueprint. I was supposed to follow in steps and do family business. And I made my arguments, but I showed through my track record and what else I did when they weren't even around. I didn't even know about the internship. And then I showed them. I go, guys, I've been doing this for a year. And then they realized, okay, kid's got hair on his chest. Maybe he is doing something. And so that's kind of when it all started to change, my friend, and the flower began to bloom.
I like that. I love it. And gosh, again, our stories have so many fascinating parallels already. And I want to now move to, well, it sounds like I'm saying I want to move to Costa Rica, but I want to move the story now to Costa Rica.
Sure.
The point there that I heard as you walked us through that very quick, bio on yourself and that story is that, you had an opportunity to simply either just work or to get into the business and really learn the business. And I'm curious, what was that? Because something that you just said there in the last response, which we're definitely going to come back to, is how you use Spanish as the medium. And I'm just really curious when you think about when you step into that business and you've got this opportunity just to work and obviously utilize the language that you're now becoming very good at and going to continue to build and improve upon. But I'm just curious, what was it that made you sort of shift from, okay, this isn't simply an opportunity to come work in a destination. This is now an opportunity for me to learn something that I can maybe own one day.
Multiple things. I fell in love with the girl of my dreams when I first got here, so I wanted to stay. So I was going to work my tail off for it.
That'll get you. Yeah.
Secondly, I'm in a beautiful country. If it was in a place where it was cold and rainy and depressing, I wouldn't want to be there.
Right.
And so it just, the stars were lining up. And then a good friend of mine owned the call center. And so I had the luxury of knowing the owner and being able to try different departments like retentions, customer support, onboarding, even learning the labor laws with HR. And he said, hey, Richard, do some training. But here's what I also found out. And I don't think it's Costa Rica. I think it's everywhere. You know that there's a top percentage of people that are exceptionally reliable. I'm not saying they carry the company, but they're the ace, and you know it. Not saying that I was, and we say in Spanish, a sapo, like a tattletale, but this is my life. I'm the eyes and ears for my good buddy. And if I saw goofing around in shenanigans, I'd let him know. If someone was doing well, I'd let him know. Why? I don't want to lose my job. I don't want his company to go out of business. And also, what an opportunity you gave me. I'm going to try to pay it forward. And so the more that I was that guy, the golden boy, the more that my friend said, hey, why don't you try this department, meet everybody there and see if you can do your Richard Magic dust there. And I saw it. And it's like wiffle ball. It was easy for me. When I first walked on the floor, I saw people that were bilingual speaking English, which is my native tongue, and your English is better than mine. And so you realize, hey, I can do this. And then secondly, you see the art of speech. And you saw the technology which assisted them with predictive dialers, CRM systems, headsets, and stuff. And so, old world, new world. And I really thought it was neat. And when I sat with the proletariat, with the people, I got to hear the gripes. So I got to learn what they're happy and what they're not happy about, how to reduce attrition. But then this is what happened. I was in my mid-30s. Time's a-ticking. I was in between jobs. I actually made phone calls to my older brother's real estate business for a couple of years to test the waters, and I realized it wasn't the right thing to do. And so I had a little bit of a capital, and I had some time. And so I was out to breakfast and a good friend of mine said, "Hey, Ricardo, why don't you open a call center?" And I'm saying, "How are you going to do this? It's 1,000 bricks and I don't even own bricks." And he says, "Just figure it out." And so for me, I started my business by renting a turnkey station at a blended center, like an internet cafe. So I could have a station for a month. I can expand accordingly. It's not private or glamorous, but guess what? I can build a business.
Yeah.
I don't have the overhead.
Yeah.
And I did that for a couple of years till I had the stable clients and some capital. Then I rented space and started building rows out and building out the server room. And guess what? Call centers do rotate. They go out of business. And so I'm not buying used underwear, but I'll buy a used Dell computer for 30, 40, 50% off, why not? And it was a great way for me financially and being very responsible to grow in a conservative way. And 7 years ago, we purchased a building, put on a third floor, built it out for 300 seats. And so it's the tortoise, it's not the hare. It's slow and steady. And my grandparents told me, "Richard, if you can't do it in cash, you just do not do it. Don't overextend yourself. Act your wage." And so that allowed me to have a governor, really to pace myself accordingly so I wouldn't burn out too fast or hurt myself. And we had multiple setbacks. Sure, I lost my largest client in 2010, but we built that back. And COVID definitely didn't assist. What happened then? Most of my people are working from home. I'm still in business, great, but what happened to the synergy?
Right.
What happened to the high fives and being with each other is I lost that. And so, but this was a gift. It was a long shot that hit. I didn't go to business school. I was a Spanish major at Arizona.
Right.
But I tell you what, instead of making 100% Richard, I want 1% off of 100 people. And I know I could have done that. I know I can train them like Dick did and be the best swim coach ever alongside you, my brother. And it's the kind of thing where when you meet great men and women, the number one thing you see about them is that they're grounded and that it is their wheelhouse. And that, Steve, you could jump into that pool and beat anybody. You're just not training. And so I earn the respect, A, because of the language, B, of the sacrifice of being 3,000 miles away from my mother, and also showing this sort of dedication. And so I don't need to hire thousands. I have 150 people, but through natural selection, the people that see that, the true essence of an individual, knowing the owner, having me invest in them so they become more self-confident, those are the people that come here and play pinball with me and work with me. And, it's like the people that punk out on the swim team. Everyone knows how to swim, but it's the guys that are willing to go all the way in the distance and live it.
Right.
Not just have it as a hobby. It needs to be a lifestyle. And if you make something a lifestyle, I think people admire that. They see that sort of dedication.
No doubt. By the way, we are coming back to the pinball comment because I've done my research and know enough about there's this whole pinball element to what you guys do over there, and I think people are going to appreciate it. But I want to, when I hear an insight like just figure it out, typically we hear that and we don't get the context with it and we don't get the story to support it. And what you did was exactly that. You provide us more context and you provide us the story, especially when it comes to the slow and steady piece. Because so often when you think back to being a child and you're at home and you need something and mom or dad look at you and go, just figure it out. That's typically an in the moment, figure it out right there and then. And what your story's speaking to is that figuring it out is a way of being and a way of living. It's a slow and steady process where at some point in that day, in that week, in that month, in that quarter, you're going to be handed something that you just need to figure it out. And you need to trust the fact that either yourself or the people around you are going to be able to find that solution, whether it comes overnight or whether it takes weeks upon months. And so much, the getting the 1% from 100 is such an important insight here when it comes to anybody who's, even if you're not trying to be a business owner and growth is just something on your horizon and you're trying to grow as an individual, think of yourself at the center of potentially 100 other people and how you can find that 1% resource from those 100 people to get to where it is you want to go. I just absolutely adore that. We're going to be clipping that, and that's going to be on the socials in terms of just that 1% from 100 is such an important way of doing things. But I just want to be really clear and come back to that notion of just figuring it out and the slow and steady approach and you alluded to some adversities there. How does a person stay true in the moments when everything about the process is telling you, no, get out, don't, just stop now? How do you remain slow and steady in that mindset and headspace of saying, I'm going to figure it out?
Only judge a person's character during chaos. You know, I love napalm in the morning. There's certain generals that could light a smoke while bombs are going around them or take a sip of tea. Yeah, you sometimes need to take a sip of tea when bombs are all around you. But how about this? I believe in romantic deaths. I get 100 years on this planet. I'm not being frivolous and fancy-free. I had a plan. I have a strategy. There's no straight lines in nature. There's always wiggle, wild cards, things happen. And so for me, as long as my intentions were honorable and I was doing things with good faith, I was willing to put my chest out and take it. I was going to take the good and the bad, but I can take it. Physically, it's one thing. If someone's beating me up, there's only so much you can take. But mentally, as long as you're not insulting my mama, I can take anything. You can say whatever you want to me. And in my mind, because I study rhetoric, I always try to understand arguments, vocabulary, semantics, delivery, timing, benefit of the doubt, and backstories. And there's a reason why people do certain things. And a lot of the times, I've also seen, my friend, if I am given the luxury of time, so I can write a draft, not send it, sleep on it, call you up, go, hey, coach, I got to ask you a couple quick questions about this meeting I have. I'm going to talk to Coach Steve about a couple things. So what happens the following day? You're refreshed. You calm down. You will not send that text. You will realize you overextended yourself. You'll cut an enormous amount of fat. I'm probably going to call the person and go, hey, coach, I'm sorry. I know yesterday I raised my voice, or I did not take Thursday into consideration. I know that things come up. And it's beautiful how that happens. If you are given a time out, you can gauge how important that relationship is with you. What are you willing to sacrifice for it? Are you willing to give something? Are you willing to have a second round of talking? You know, just to see what happens. So you can save a marriage, a Thanksgiving dinner, or a business relationship. And so if I'm not given the luxury of time, my suggestion is to speak second. And also, if you're having a really tough time face-to-face with somebody, even if it's someone you love, look here, because eyes are like Medusa, suck the life out of you, unless they're positive. But if they're negative and you just don't want to look away or be disrespectful, the technique is this. And remember, tilt your head every now and again and nod. But take it. Take it. And little by little, if they start repeating things or eliminating things, and I've also seen latency produces regret. That when they'll go, oh, Richard, I'm so sorry for saying that, or I really didn't mean that. Let me start over again. You're like, keep on going. You know what I mean? 2 ears, 2 eyes, 1 mouth. Come on, play it smart. Play it smart. It's almost like Wu Wei. It's least resistance. I will use wind, gravity, and currents to my advantage. And if you're, I want to know what you know, coach. Seriously. And I want to see where we mesh, where I disagree with you, and I'll definitely put that there and keep working on it. Yeah. But every time you talk and I get huffy-puffy, the more that I listen to you, guess what I'm also doing? Reducing temperature, and you know, as a professional swimmer, it's core, it's breathing. So now I'm really trying to breathe, so I'm not sweating, and I'm relaxing. And as long as I have my balance and composure, I'm going to win. Maybe not the argument, but the moment. And that, I believe, is the most important thing.
Yeah, and so much of this is going to, you think about what we taught to with the moment when you were 27 and that growing up piece, and being able to solicit insight without necessarily taking it as gospel and applying it immediately. There's that level of respect for the person, but there's also a willingness to not burn the bridge. And then I'm hearing it again here now as you come all the way around to this and you go through the adversities of what it has been to build the business, going through the loss of a big client, going through the pandemic, all these things, to then still say, listen, this is not the time for us to shift out of what has gotten us here or who the person we are and the self-respect that we've built for ourselves. This is the time to actually double down on that and say, hey, listen, now is the time that we need to trust what has gotten us here in so many ways, just to simply ride the ship. And hey, if we need to reassess when we get out of this, then let's reassess when we get out of this. But for right now, who we are, that person's done us pretty good up to this point, and it would be silly to almost burn any bridges because that person within the adversity is allowing the adversity to win. They're allowing the adversity to overcome them and reshape and re-guide them, even though what's shaped them and what's guided them to this point has done them nothing but good in so many ways.
Coach, your best part of the movie is when Rocky gets up after being beat up by Apollo, or Maximus in the Colosseum, or whatever movie. When you think that they're done, Indiana Jones, he still escapes, James Bond.
Right.
You don't want something that's easy. People do want that sort of resistance so they can earn it. And then if you really are in your last legs and you still find whatever is inside of you to get off of that mountain across that desert, that's where legends are made. And so I, as I mentioned before, romantic deaths, I'd rather die a champion than live weak and scared and beholden. And I just didn't want to do that. And just fortunately for me, you know what it is too, my friend? When you have preventative measures in place, it's not like you're making snap decision right or left, it's it. You know, like a roulette table, you know, the black or the red. I've had 2 or 3 preventative things in there, so it's prevention instead of a cure. So these decisions, unless it's a super wild card like a tornado or something blowing up my building, I'm prepared for that, and there's a very good chance I have a plan B and C. And I've also maybe spoken to the client prior to let him know so there's no surprises. And so these are the sort of things that can reduce temperatures and make it more manageable for you. And, you know, just be on top of your game. Be 1 or 2 steps ahead, and maybe think of the 5 different things that could go wrong, you know, just so at least you're prepared.
There's definitely a reoccurring theme throughout everything you provided here, is that level of self-awareness to create those boundaries, whether it be for you and yourself or for you and the business.
Correct.
Those boundaries are clearly have a presence throughout all these examples that you've given so far. And if we stay in this idea of, you know, continuing to build that self-respect, continuing to build upon opportunities. One thing I'm always curious of is that, you know, I think you said it was 7 years ago you bought the building that you're in, and how long have you had the business now? Sorry.
17 years.
17 years. So
February 6th will be our 17th year.
17th year. So we're a little over 3 years away from 2 full decades of this thing. And when you sit here and we speak to so much of what you're providing is in reflection right now, but for you to look forwards, and I think this is where we get to really serve the listener, is for any listener that's sitting here right now thinking, I want a version of that. It has nothing to do with Spanish, it has nothing to do with the call center, but there's something about Richard's story that is resonating with me. I'm curious, what is it that keeps you now, what keeps that appetite as great as it is for you to be speaking to this, and to obviously, you've got a building that can fit 300 from what I heard, and 150 of those seats are taken. What's going to keep you hungry to fill the other 150? I'm just curious.
Coach, you know it. Paying it forward. My electromagnetic energy that goes through me and then goes to you. This is a young man's game. I'm preparing the next generation. I have plenty of money. I can eat my dinners and rest at night. I'm not worried, okay? And so when the gold and jewels lose its luster, that's why certain athletes and actors and businessmen, they teach. They teach. Why? Because there's something inside them that wants to do more. And this is something they have fidelity, they have the passion about. You ask me a question, I'm willing to get up and come here in the mornings to teach a soft skills class, to celebrate a sale and a win. But on the flip side, my God, do I have to deal with attrition rates and complications when it comes to certain demanding clients, and just the labor laws and this new generation that just, once again, I got to work on their soft skills because they're more non-voice, texting and chatting, and they're brilliant, okay? But I've seen a different sort of vigor and grit. It's like, let's just say back in the day, people used to take out a shovel to dig a hole. Today's generation gets in the machine and builds the hole. It's still the same time, a little bit of efforts, but there's a big difference between me and you doing 20 different shovels to get that out. We're like, yeah, you know, it's, you know, when you put your sweat and your blood into something, it maybe gives it that stronger foundation or glue or cement. I just don't know. I always believe a home-cooked meal is better, or when someone paints something compared to a print,
Right.
live theater compared to a movie.
Right.
There's always something about that moment that's special for you, that you get. And, even like this podcast, for an example, Coach. I mean, it's wonderful to spend this time with you and to share ideas. And you're in Louisiana, I'm here in Costa Rica, and, but it's the sort of thing, we're very fortunate. 50 years ago, we couldn't have done this, but today we can.
Right.
And we're taking advantage of the medium, but the real juice is what we're doing here. We don't need bells and whistles. It's a very simple podcast right now.
Yeah.
But it's more, illuminating than any sort of neon lights that you could see in a city,
Right. And there's so much value in what you're saying here for anyone who's, because this podcast is listened to across many generations, and there's going to be some generations that are still holding on to the fact that the back in my day mindset, right? It's just like that. Hey, like, how can I appreciate the way these kids work today? Because back in my day, we had to fill in the blank. And what you're saying here is that the grit is still there. It just looks different now. Firstly, and secondly, there's opportunities that we had today that instead of looking at it and saying, man, it would have been nice for me to have that opportunity 50 years ago, how can we optimize it now? Let's just appreciate it for what it is in the moment. Correct. So that we can utilize it in the moment. And anybody who's on that growth journey right now that's maybe sat there wishing that they'd started 5 years earlier and they've seen somebody do what they've done in the last 5 years that they wanted to, you kind of got a choice at this point. One, you can sit in that and continue to feel sorrow and whatever it might be for your situation, or you can look at the landscape as it is today and say, how can I make an opportunity for myself, and how can I optimize the moment I'm in right now instead of wasting all this time wishing and hoping and could have done, should have done, all this kind of thing? Because that's what we're talking to here, man. It's like you're encouraging us here through this insight of what might it mean just to simply play the hand that you're currently being dealt in terms of this time that we're in.
Well, Coach, I tell you what, I was not mature enough at 27 to start a business. Not even close. I didn't have the impulse control. It took me till my mid-30s, which most people would say is way too late. You should be a 21-year-old rock star creating an app, being a TikTok star and a millionaire and an influencer or whatever. Okay. Well, what do you want me to say? Maybe I'm a late bloomer, or I was being true to myself. There was absolutely no way I was going to take a contract at 27, even though I could have maybe done something and maybe been successful. There's that sort of ethics that you need to have. You don't take it to try. If you're going to do something with somebody, you got to give them your all, even if you're a novice or a complete expert. I'm not saying I wasn't going to give my best at 27, but I did not have the mentorship. I didn't understand it yet. I wasn't ready. And so I wanted to be around the people. I wanted to learn it in a nurturing way so I could master levels and understand every single department before becoming a CEO, where it's usually the opposite. And so I believe in natural progression. I was not hard on myself. Yes, all of my friends are exceptionally successful. Doctors, lawyers, architecture, business, arts, you name it. And did they start before me? They did. Not saying that I am more successful than they are, but guess what? Sometimes they max out or pace, and sometimes you catch in it and go. So mine was just a little bit later in life. Financially, I caught up, if that's what you're looking for. But it's really the fulfillment.
Yep.
It was the fulfillment. And so I didn't mind the apprenticeship. I didn't mind paying my dues. Not wishing for it, but seeing that light in the distance and knowing that if I continued, I would get it. And so that's the way I saw it. Was it a joke? No. Was it an adventure? Somewhat. But you know what it really was, Coach? It was a journey. As I say, I was willing to die with my boots on. I could have always come home and worked at a family business. but I just wanted to drink life, my friend. I really, really, really wanted to take a chance.
I love it. I love it. And I think it's so, like, this is as strong a reason as to why I've renamed the podcast and calling it Growth Ready now, is that to hear you say and acknowledge at a certain point in your life, hey, I just wasn't ready. You weren't saying at that point that this isn't something that you can still have. You were just simply saying, I'm not ready right now for it. But because you remained in fulfillment, that's how you eventually get there. You didn't say, I'm not ready, and then go down a completely different path away from the one that you could have potentially been on. You said, I'm not ready right now, but let's stay the course. Let's stay the course, and let's pursue fulfillment. Let's find the joy. Let's find the reward in this whole journey, in this road that I'm on. But at some point, acknowledging that fulfillment is going to get me ready. It's going to get me ready. It's going to allow me to realize one day, as I wake up in my fulfillment, you know what? I think now might be the time to take that next step. I think I'm ready for that step now. Had I not pursued fulfillment, how could I have ever truly established readiness for what I wanted?
Spot on.
It's powerful, man. It's powerful. And this is the stuff that people need to understand, is that just because you are comparing, and this is where this entire interview now gets to go full circle, when you think about the not being afraid, the ability to be fully prepared, and making sure that you're keeping those insights and that advice and those influences at an arm's length, understanding that if you get too caught up in the advice that's not good for you, if you're not willing to bet on yourself, if you're not willing to get prepared, chances are you're never going to be ready for what it is you actually want. But because you are willing to bet on yourself and take a step towards fulfillment, in time, as you kept those people at an arm's length, I love you, I appreciate you, that insight and advice isn't coming from a particularly ideal place, but again, I appreciate it. You allowed yourself to stay on that track. Like I like to call it my North Star whenever I'm talking about this stuff. But that's what I'm hearing here, Rich. It's right. Like there's this. You had a North Star, and you've never lost sight of it. It sounds like.
I believe in intuition. There were certain times I would get certain butterflies on things that nobody else could understand but me. Yeah. But then again, I had wonderful friends here. Girl of my dreams. I've been with her for 24 years. So I was swept up in a whirlwind of romance and Spanish and paradise and call centers, which has a bad rap with Hollywood. And I tell you, there's 5 campaigns we don't do, Coach. I don't do sports books, casinos, stocks, pharmacies, or sweepstakes. So no matter what Glengarry, Glen Ross, or Boiler Room, or Wolf of Wall Street make you think, not all call centers do those things.
I appreciate that as well, because anybody, I'm sure there were some people whose heads went there. Again, I happen to know who you are and the spaces that you operate in, but I appreciate you framing that for everybody so that we can truly appreciate that part of it. But Richard, here's what I want, as we start to really come through this. It's just been such a blast. Talk to me about the pinball stuff, because we talk about stepping into our optimal self. We're a big part of that on this podcast. So you found a way, it seems, to not only do things as seriously and within the rails that you're supposed to do as you build a business, but you found a way to really inject parts of your truest self into it as well. Tell us a little bit about the background with the pinball machines and how you've maybe done this sort of thing over the years.
I completely relate myself to Tom Hanks in the movie Big. Oh, I'm a 17-year-old and a 52-year-old. I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and Ricky Schroeder had a show called Silver Spoons that had one of the coolest arcades, and I was so envious. To a Generation X, or owning a video game, a machine, or even a pinball machine was just so out of reach. Right. So what happens? Recess is the best class in school. You know that. That's where you make your friends and let off steam. And so here I had this space. Fortunately, I had the discretionary income. I had a buddy with a truck and strong arm and back. And I would go on the Craigslist and the Mercado Libres, and Don Jose, 4 hours away, is selling 4 of his machines because his arcade's out of business. And I'd go there with the cash, grab them, and come back like a champion. And so it's a wonderful game room. I have the largest collection of pinball machines and retro arcade machines here at the call center in Central America. But the point being is, it's my passion. And these are old machines. Pinball's beautiful. My oldest is a 1970 Bally's Camelot, and the newer one's a mid-90s Data East Last Action Hero with Schwarzenegger, and I've everything in between. But my favorite, though, Coach, are those old electromechanical machines from the 70s and prior, especially the 70s, because you got the wheel, okay, the marquee, and the side art's beautiful. The sound is usually a xylophone or bells, but this is what I love the most. It was the last generation of the play fields that were painted, because the machines after that are either a laminate or a sticker. And so just like old instruments, you see little cracks, right? And so it's got its own special role. But currently I own 12 machines. It's the only hill I'm willing to die on with my wife. But fortunately, I got a large center and a huge man cave at my house, and so it fits and is a way. But oh, what a beautiful hobby, beautiful medium. I love pinball machines. And so these agents get to try something they've never had before. And if you come to me, Coach, and you say, I've tried virtual pinball, I'm like, come on, there's a huge difference. Yeah. And so they really get to feel the machines and see things they would have never experienced before. And so the main thing, my brother, is when I am downstairs playing the games, not only do they say, good morning, Jefe, but I get a few shoulder taps. It's to me, it's professional. That's not, you know, on my personal space. And so people feel comfortable enough with me to compete against me, to see I'm chilling. Right. And it's my one area besides my office and training rooms and the floor where everyone's the same. If you can kick my ass in pinball that day, you win. And so I love that. And also it reduces stress. People see it. When clients come, they see how I treat myself and the people here. And then I call them out. I'm like, hey, Billy, how come you don't have games at your office back in Chicago? Right. Come on, you can afford it. So, you know, it's one of those things. But thank you for bringing that up. I mean, I collect this right behind me here. This is a 1961 Ricola Regis. They're gorgeous. You need to get a jukebox and put them in your home.
It is. It's just like that. For me, it's a way of not only bringing in a passion of yours into the workplace and all those reasons, like you said, like to be able to just create this place where people can just be exactly that, people, just be themselves. But at the same time, there's an essence of just, hey, look at the pristine quality of something like this and how one can take care of something like this.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
So, we were talking things about products that were made 65 years ago, whatever it may be, and to be able to say, look, you can actually look after something like this and maintain something like this and cherish something like this. And there's so many qualities that come with that speak to that, to be quite frank, like as someone who's learning about your business in such a recent time, to be able to say, what does that say for the values and the mission of the company and of the person that owns the company, if they're willing to be, you know, able to look at something like a pinball machine and get so much from it and use it in such a valuable, you know, just way within the organization. It speaks. It's metaphorical in so many ways in terms of what your business speaks to, I think.
You know, what's the shame? You could ask 100 men, what would you rather have, a brand new Rolex or 5 pinball machines? Half of them would be like, I'll take the Rolex because they don't like pinball. But then a quarter of that would say, I'll take the Rolex, but in their mind, they're like, I wish I could have the pinball, but I should have the Rolex because Billy, Tommy, and Joey will think I'm rich and I'm great, I'm successful. Yeah. And you got that remaining 25% like me. They're like, hell yeah, right. Rolex. Of course I want a pinball machine. And so, as I say, what does that do? It rejuvenates you. If you know if you know your true passion is something like an art, or in my case, these games give you such joy. Why wouldn't you? Now, I would love to eat pizza and Pringles and have milkshakes all day. That brings me joy. But then there's other things that you can do that won't harm you. In fact, I will say this, my friend. I don't have the discipline for Eastern meditation, but if I play pinball for 2 to 3 hours and do a marathon, decompress stimulation, my mind wanders, that's where I can connect with myself. That's where I can recharge my batteries. And so everybody has their own vertical and mediums. Mine is washing my convertible and playing pinball machines. And if that's what gets Richard centered on a Sunday to prepare for a Monday, well, then by all means.
I love it. Everyone has their own ritual and process for escaping, man. And if that allows you to escape for long enough where you get to recharge, reconnect with whoever that best version of yourself is, who cares? Who cares about the way in which you have to do it? And brother, this has been an absolute pleasure. I would love for you just to maybe share briefly here just some insight about, hey, you know, there's that person listening right now, and they know there's more out there. They know they can do it, and they just need that final bit of belief, that final insight that's just going to say, not only am I ready for this, but I'm going to go actually execute and take action upon this. What might that insight be for any listener that's feeling that right now?
Well, my English friend, I'm going to use football, not your football, American football.
Okay, you got it. You got it. Go ahead.
You need first downs before
blessing.
touchdowns. And I really don't want people to be hard on themselves, because if you do, you're adding additional weight, and it's not fair. Yeah. Okay? If you need to revert back to the time you beat up a bully or saved a kitten and you were a hero for that day, then milk that.
Yeah.
Because if it happened at 8, 18, 28, 38, or 48, use it. Okay? And as I say, the self-respect of the making the bed, a proper diet, you don't need to be religious about it, but you should take care of yourself so you have a good stomach and a good day. All right? And maybe give your word. If you're going to call somebody back, send an email. Just be responsible that way. Build a pipeline. Make sure that you double check your notes. I like when people do due diligence like you and I both did prior to the podcast. We knew 20 things about each other. And so that assists you in anchoring. It reduces any sort of egos. It allows you to find 5 things you have in common or even more. Mm-hmm. And so that's reducing any sort of fear. That is extremely getting yourself ready to grow, because unlike small talk, cocktail party conversation, I'm walking up to Coach Steve ripping out 50 things about him in front of everybody.
That's right.
And they're like, do you guys know each other? I'm like, his reputation preceded him, and I couldn't wait to meet my future friend. And so everyone's like, damn, I totally wasn't. This guy's wearing a tux and I'm in a t-shirt. You're like, you're damn right. You're damn right, Tuxedo Richard. And so these are the sort of things people can do individually to not offend, but as you say, to be prepared. Yeah. And there's many ways to do it. And so that will only give you that much more happy energy when you're with people, and so you don't feel out of place. But, you know, I had a great time today, Coach. You bring the best out of us. Phenomenal interview, and you're just a good guy, and I really appreciate your time.
Richard, that means the world to me, and that insight, we can all take that away. Find ways to assess yourselves over first downs, not necessarily touchdowns. And I think when we do it that way, we can be slow and steady. We can find ways to be patient enough where we can get prepared, and we have no reason to be afraid. And that's what I'm taking from this conversation, brother. And I just thank you for your time. And we'll just leave you with, I will forever envy someone that gets to live in Costa Rica.
You got to come visit me one day, buddy.
I think that's a verbal contract that we just made, that I'm going to have to come down and check out these pinballs for myself. But, brother, this is a blast. Thank you so much for the time, and just best of luck with everything going forwards.
Take good care, Coach Steve.
That was such a truly fun experience with Richard, to simply hear about his story and learn from him in a way that, for someone, let's say that's, I think he said he was 52 when we were talking. So I'm 12, 13 years behind Richard. And to think how many of you listen to this may be in a similar situation to myself right now, where you're 2 or 3 years into something, into a position, into a business, whatever it may be. And you know your value, you know your potential, and for whatever reason, you know as well, you have to wait. It's not going to come easy, and it's going to be difficult. It's going to take time. To hear someone who has established what they've established now, going on 17 years, to say, hey, slow and steady. Slow and steady. Don't forget that at any point during this journey that you're on, the instant gratification just simply may never come. And that you're always going to have to just remain true to you and true to your process in a way that may frustrate you and may leave you wanting more sooner. But that slow and steady approach is really going to pay off when it comes to getting what it is you truly want. As long, and this is key, that you stay with fulfillment. Let fulfillment guide you, is what I heard from Richard. And that is just simply so powerful and at the same time reassuring. It's reassuring for anyone out there listening to this that is new into a venture, new into a position, new into a certain direction within their life. And even those of you that aren't new to something, if you are considering something, if you are in this open-mindedness right now of an opportunity to think, hey, if as and when I commit to something like this, it may still take time. It may be a minute until I get where it is I want to get to and what it is that I want. Amazing insight. So appreciative of Richard and his generosity of insight. And as always, appreciative of you and your time and willingness to continue to listen to the show. And I hope you're enjoying this newly vamped, remodeled, rebranded version of the show and renamed, of course, previously career competitor, now growth ready, because I believe that with the work that we're doing, that is what we're doing here. We are getting you growth ready for whatever direction and whatever area within your world you are trying to reach, trying to get to, and wherever you're trying to achieve. So stay on the path. Trust the fact it's going to take a time. It's going to be slow and steady, but in time you're going to get there. And keep coming back while you're on that journey and listening to this show for those deposits of insight, that encouragement for you to keep going on this path. I appreciate your time. Best of luck with anything and everything you've got going on. And bye for now.
Thank you for tuning in to Growth Ready. If you liked what you heard and are feeling ready to grow, be sure to leave a 5-star rating, subscribe to the show, and share the episode with someone you know is ready to fuel their growth journey today. We love our community, so don't hesitate to reach out to us at podcast@growthready.com. And until next time, we are Growth Ready, and you will be too.